again, Martin here. I'm going to tell you a very, very personal story today, one that's very dear to me. The reason for that is I want to talk to you about memories, how we relate to memories. It's very logical to assume that if we've had a bad experience, that becomes a bad memory. We view that as a bad memory. We relate to it as a bad memory because it was a bad experience. Maybe it was even a traumatic experience. But they don't have to be. Bad experiences don't have to be bad memories. We can make them into good memories. We can make them into very powerful memories, very valuable memories that we can really use in life to a lot of good, both for ourselves and for others. I think maybe 15 years ago, way back in the day, I was rehearsing for a show. If you haven't gotten used to it by now, then all my metaphors, and I always say I was in the show or I used to be this because that's my background. So a lot of my stories and a lot about my analogies are based in show business and theater because that's what I did for a living. So I was in rehearsals for a show. I had this really tall American choreographer. He was very emotional. He was very gay, and I mean that in the best sense of the word because I actually had a very good relationship with him and we really hit it off. I loved him as a choreographer, but he could be very emotional and he could get really, really upset. And after a rehearsal, I'm sitting there having notes, getting notes from the choreographer after a run through. And next to me are a bunch of girls who are also dancers in this show. And he's just upset with the dancers. I'm sitting there in the middle waiting for my notes, but in the meantime, he's just getting so mad at the girls because he thought they sucked. It was just like everything was wrong with them in this run through. So I'm sitting there in the middle, sitting on the floor, watching this really tall American choreographer just spew vile and anger and resentment towards these poor girls who were not even that old. They were probably around, 20, 21 years old for the most part of it. So they were just sitting there being like scared, stiff. And it was really unfair. It was not cool the way that he gave feedback, but it was what it was. The odd thing that I experienced in that moment was he didn't bother me. When he got that upset, when he got irrationally upset and angry, it didn't bother me. I didn't know why at the time. I know now, but at the time, I was just looking at the girls who were like shaking with fear and wondering, why doesn't that bother me? It bothered me on their behalf because I thought he was being unfair, but it didn't bother me personally. Years later, I figured it out that it was because of something that happened to me when I was very young, when I was 10. One evening, about 10 years old, I was out driving my bike around the little village where I grew up, very small town. The reason why I was out late in the evening, it was maybe 11 o'clock in the evening, it was dark, was that my father was not at home. I'm an only child, and I was brought up living alone with my parent, only child, single parent. My father was an alcoholic. So he was out drinking, and I was home alone at age 10 waiting for him to come home. That happened a lot. So it was not unusual for me. I was used to it. So I took my bike and I started driving around town just looking for him. He had his usual hangouts, and usually I ended up finding him somewhere, and I said, look, you gotta come home. I'm hungry. Come feed me. I gotta get to school tomorrow morning or whatever. So I'm at the top of this hill going down through the center of this little town. And you could see all the way down at the bottom of the hill. There's this little bridge that goes over a little stream of water. And up on the other side is the actual center of the town. And by center, I mean like 3 stores and a bank and then train station. That was it. But I could see from the top of my hill, driving down, I could see someone lying in the bike lane at the bottom of the hill, lying on the pavement, and out in the ditch was a moped. I knew my dad was out on the moped. When I raced down and got closer, I could see that the person was not just lying on the pavement, but there was blood as well. And when I got real close, I could see that A, that it was a similar moped to my dad, and B, there was not just blood. There was a whole pool of blood covering the whole bike lane. And in the middle of it was my dad. And it was not just my dad. It was my dead dad. The strange thing is that in that moment, I don't remember what I did at all. I didn't even remember if I yelled out or, cried out his name, or if I, poked him or kicked him to check if he really was dead or there was no any. I don't remember anything. I just remember the image. Because the emotions in me seeing that were so strong and so intense that that picture was forever like laser printed into my mind and into my memory. In tears, scared, I drove my bike back up the hill. And here's the funny bit. It's tragic, but it's funny. The only thing I remember is thinking on the way up, driving back home, tears streaming down my face at age 10, I was thinking, what do I do now? Now I live alone. How does one do that? What am I supposed to do? I'm not used to, taking care of everything. Now I have to cook for myself. I have to clean. I have to learn how to clean. And I have to go to school tomorrow morning. What am I going to tell the teachers? Having to say that, oh, my dad is dead, so it's just me now. I had all these questions, and it's bizarre, right? But that's what I thought. So I went home and I called my grandfather, who was a retired doctor. And I called him because I thought, just in my 10-year-old mind, he'll know what to do. He'll know what I can do. He's a doctor. So I called my grandfather, who lived, like 3 hours away from where I lived. So it was not like he could just drive there and, say, I'll be there in 20 minutes. So he said, look, Martin, calm down. Go next door and knock on the door on your neighbor. Get them to come back down, help with your father. They'll know what to do. Just knock on their door and tell them what happened and ask for them help. They'll know what to do. And I said, but it's like 11:30, in the evening. Isn't it impolite to go and knock on someone's door and it's really late? Can I do that? And my grandfather said, yeah, don't worry. You can do that. It's fine. Just go knock on the door. So I did that. And of course, fine, no problem. My neighbor's girlfriend was there, I remember, and she went with me back. When we came back down there, my father was still lying there on the floor, but he was not lying in the same position. It was a slightly altered position. So, in fact, he was not dead. He was just passed out, drunk, and maybe had been unconscious for a while because of he hit his head. And that's where all the blood come from. He lost a lot of blood, so he was gone, but he was alive. So she called a taxi. It was in the day before cell phone, so she went, found a phone booth. Money, remember the days? Called a taxi, got my father home. The next day, alcoholic as he was, he just pretended like nothing ever happened. That's what alcoholics do. They just deny and pretend everything's fine. And obviously he did that because he felt really embarrassed, because half of his face was one big sore that was probably really painful, and he couldn't remember anything of what had happened, I'm sure. So he just pretended like nothing had happened and everything was fine. But I went to school, and the only thing I could remember was that image of my father lying, presumably dead, in the pool of blood. In a blood of pool. In a pool of blood. Speaking is difficult. And I remembered that image for the rest of my life. So, to get back to the choreographer, when he was standing there screaming at these girls, and I was wondering, why isn't that so scary to me? It was because I had seen worse. I had experienced worse. I had seen worse. I had had something that was more scary than some emotional choreographer being really, really upset. But it wasn't until many years later that I realized that the real issue is how you relate to a memory. Because for years, I resented my dad. I was so angry with him for the way, not for the way he treated me, but for the way he didn't treat me. Because it was just abandonment. So for years, that was a really bad memory, until I suddenly started to notice that experience actually helps me a lot of time, because it puts so many things into perspective. It makes me so much stronger. It makes me so much more understanding of what personal hurt and emotional abuse can be and what it can feel like. So today, that memory is my best memory. It's my favorite memory. It's my worst experience still, to date, by far. I've never experienced anything that could come close to what it felt like as a 10-year-old boy to see your dad being dead and having to deal with that alone in the middle of the night on an abandoned street in a little village out in the middle of nowhere. But today, I'm grateful. I'm really grateful that I have seen it. Obviously, because sooner or later, I made it out all right. A lot of people, they go through that kind of stuff and they don't make it out all right. So obviously it's not something that I can advocate. You should really have some abandonment in your life at some point, because it makes you stronger. Obviously, that's not the point, because you're balancing on the edge of a knife in your childhood and in your teens. Do you come out just sane enough that you can actually make the choice? Because that's what this is about. How you relate to memories is a choice. It's your choice. It's not a given that a traumatic experience equals a bad memory. That's your choice. If it was so in the beginning, that's fine. But you always have the choice to turn it around. You always have the choice to see it as something possible, as something positive. And you can even do it in the moment. As when you've learned to do this, you can actually turn it around, and you can make the choice in the moment when it happens. I recommend on that topic that you go find a talk by Eric Edmeades called The Hindsight Window, because he made a whole concept out of just this making a choice of what kind of memory you create in the moment. Eric Edmeades, The Hindsight Window. Go check it out. It's really good. But that's my story for you today. I hope it helped you in some kind of way to get a little perspective. If you're dealing with that kind of issues, that's how I experienced it, and that's what helped me. So thank you for listening, and I hope you have a great day.